So, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Emma Franti. I work at the University of Birmingham, and today I'm introducing the TDAG meeting. TDAG is the Trees and Design Action Group. It's a network and a forum that brings together people and organisations to support the role of urban trees through better collaboration in planning, design, construction, management, maintenance of our urban places. My TDAG colleagues are Deanne Brettle and Sue James, and today's seminar is called Getting It Right for Trees, part one. And there will be a part two, I think, next month. Before we start, I would like to thank our knowledge sharing partners for partnering with us on this event. We have partners to help disseminate our seminars to different groups of people to try and bring all sorts of communities together. So our partners for today are the Arb Association, Fund for Trees, the Institute of Chartered Foresters, the Institute of Highways Engineers, the Landscape Institute, and the Urban Design Group. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce our chair for today, which is Marybeth Hadasz. Marybeth is Green Infrastructure Manager at Urban&Civic, and you may know Urban&Civic as master developers, probably through their schemes in Alconbury Weald, Waterbeach and Halton. So over to you, Marybeth.
Thank you, Emma. Again, my name is Marybeth Hadasz. I apologize that Scott couldn't make it today. He's the head of Green Infrastructure at Urban&Civic. And Urban&Civic is a master land developer focused on delivering large sites. So that's 2,500 to 10,000 homes. All of our sites are located normally within 100 miles of London, most in East Anglia. And our role is to gain planning consent, build infrastructure and services, and sell plots to builders. We don't build homes. And we are different from other developers because we have strong values related to biodiversity and sustainability, and we are truly landscape-led. We normally do build our green infrastructure ahead of people moving in, and we find this makes people happy to live in our communities. So our goal is to build communities that make people happy. My background is that I've worked as a landscape architect for more than 40 years, primarily in the United States, and for the last 8 in the UK. My boss, Scott, has a horticulture background, so I think we make a well-rounded team together. So without further ado, I'd like to begin introducing the speakers. So we'll start with Catherine Nuttgens, founder of Nuttgens Urban Forestry. She's a senior associate, and she's the Treeconomics strategy lead for the Sheffield Street Tree Partnership and project manager for Trees Together, to talk about why do you want to plant the tree. So Catherine, with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks very much, Marybeth. I will just share my screen here. So I'm going to be talking about basically why plant a tree. What's the purpose of it? Now, I just want to check from everyone. Can you all see that? Is that all working well? Excellent. Thank you very much. So why plant trees? It's a good question. First of all, I'll just introduce myself. I'm Catherine Nuttgens. I'm an independent urban forester. I'm a senior associate for Treeconomics. I work a bit with them, but mainly I'm involved in Sheffield and South Yorkshire. I've got 2 main contracts, which is working for the Street Tree Partnership as the strategy lead. So that's a really interesting role. And then I also work with the University of Sheffield and the SIMCA, the mayoral authority, with a project called Trees Together South Yorkshire, which is always all about kind of setting the ground rules of what we want to see with trees in South Yorkshire.
I'm really sorry to interrupt. We can't see your slides. Sorry.
Oh, right. Sorry, I got a hands up there. Oh, damn it. What's happened? Let me just bring that up again.
It's okay. Sorry to interrupt you, and don't panic.
No, it's good. I'm not sure what happened there. Can you now see those slides?
We can. Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right. So, yes, so it's just me and the maritime pine there. That was an Anglesey on last week, in fact. Very nice, apparently. ICF. So yeah, that's my role really. But I also work across the UK. I've worked with National Trust and with the Woodland Trust and various other organisations, and in Belfast. So I've used Treeconomics diagram here to talk about the benefits of trees. Now, I think probably everybody on this call understands that trees are good, because why would you be on this call otherwise? And this is a diagram that gets used again and again, basically because it kind of runs down everything that we know about that gives us the trees give us benefit in the cities. But what I find a little bit easier is thinking about 5 things basically of what trees do for us. So we're talking about the whole of the treescape here. We're looking at everything from ancient woodlands, looking at all these new trees that have been planted, all the woodland trees. We're looking at self-set trees, so all the wild places. I think there's been a lot of conversation around edges recently. We're also looking at street trees, obviously very important. And then probably, the most exciting is where we've actually changed very hard environments into growing spaces again. So think projects like Greater Green and a lot of the bioswales and things like that. But let's have a look first of all about what trees do for us. Now, the first thing that comes to mind that trees are really helpful with is kind of mitigating some of the problems of climate change. So trees are great at intercepting that rainfall. They stop the peak flow of water going straight into the rivers, causing those peak flows and then causing flooding. They slow it all down and help it takes longer for water to percolate through the soil. They also help stabilise some of that soil, so we're not getting so much nutrification into the rivers. They help pick a lot of pollution, particularly particulate pollution, both the 2.5 and 5 particulate pollution that you get. They trees with hairy leaves and trees with very leaves with high surface areas, so where they're very where they've got lots of little leaves, are really good at picking up that pollution and capturing it in the air. They act like filters to clean the air. There's also carbon capture. I think where we've got cities with really, really extensive woodlands, that certainly is a part of it, getting the carbon capture in. But when you start looking at street trees, it's possibly an argument that's slightly more difficult to make, but it all makes a difference. So cleaning our environment is more and more important. And not to mention things like shading as well, that as it gets hotter and hotter, they provide that benefit. The next one, this is mainly in older woodlands. This is a woodlands in Sheffield, where we have all the biodiversity. Ancient woodlands is in the UK is terrestrially one of the best places for biodiversity. So it's vital that we protect these spaces and make sure that they are pristine and well kept for to be able to support those level of species. The older that trees are, the more species that they start to accumulate. So if you've got things like very ancient oak trees, they help support thousands of different species. I mean, that's kind of where that priority needs to be. Not everything can be useful for biodiversity. If you have a tree in the city centre that's surrounded entirely by hard standing, it's not going to have the biodiversity that it has, say, of one of these hazels or oak trees in ancient woodland. But yeah, the woodland nature of this is very, very important. And then looking at amenity. So amenity basically means friendly trees, like amenable. It's to be friendly, and it's what perhaps bring pleasure as a sense of place, what we like the look of. These are some Kanjan cherries in Sheffield, and these were very appealing over lockdown. People went to go and see them. But then the other pictures of looking down from Stormont, and you've got these lime trees that are planted in rows that really kind of draws the eye either up or down that road, looking from Stormont from that point of view, but looking up, you get those great limes on there. So you get that place making, and it is important. I mean, just to point out, these pink cherries are actually the other side of the biodiversity side, because they're no good for biodiversity at all, as they've got no, and they don't, pollinators can't actually get to the nectar. So yeah, it's really it's important to kind of balance out what your priorities are in these things. Economy. So there's lots of things that we're beginning to find that trees actually give us. Particularly around food growing, it's something that's very important in Sheffield, and I expect around the country, where thinking about how we can get produce from the urban trees is starting to become quite an important thing. Also, trees, again, going kind of back to that amenity value, but people linger under trees. And there's been quite a lot of studies done about how trees can actually help enhance and encourage people to go shopping. This is Birmingham, I think, was there with the Woodland Trust. You can see the photographer taking the picture for some of the tree equity stuff there. And people do, they stay under those trees in a warm day like that. They'll sit and have coffee in the cafes. It just softens it all up. It makes people want to stay there. So it's really important to have these trees for that economy, for the food and for the commerce. And also, actually, in Sheffield, we have a lot of timber woodlands, so productive woodlands, and actually that funds our tree team quite substantially. It's good. And the next one is people. So people like trees. It's something, when people are around trees, it makes them feel better. There's certainly been quite old research now done about how if people can see trees outside of their hospital beds, that it actually makes them get better quicker. But I think anyone that's been in a woodland, this was a little gig that was going on in, I think it was Sam Lee or something, but it was just lovely. It just makes you feel better, and makes you feel connected to nature. And then having children playing in the woods, it's often a very early memory that people have of playing in the woods, and something that they think fondly of. And that can kind of be extended a little bit around the cultural narrative of trees. So looking at where the law has been changed, or where things have happened that have rocked things, then it's often not, say, the benefits of trees, like they mitigated lots of rainfall and they shaded this, but it's more about how people feel about trees. And often that's the driver to help that actually changes political, changes the law and changes the way that trees are valued. So that's kind of the benefits of trees. It's the way I like to think about it, with those 5 benefits, but there are challenges. So, I mean, increasing canopy cover, it's simply for a city, to increase canopy cover, one thing you need to do is look after the trees you've already got, because trees that are already in the ground and growing well put on more canopy cover than planting lots of little trees to begin with. But you also need to plan for trees. So making sure that you know where your trees are going, and then you plant more trees. Often that can be done the wrong way around. I think originally in the UK it was like, let's just plant trees everywhere. No, we need to get them in the right place. And one thing that we find in the UK, I think anyone that's been in charge of planting trees in any city, anywhere, is that there's always a reason not to plant a tree. Whatever it is, it can be cost, but the utilities under the ground, the ecologists say, well, it's got to be scrub, really, we don't need any more trees. There can be some archaeology, particularly in woodland, looking at things like that. Landscape design, the landscape designer may not want trees or be less keen on trees than you are. Planning, if you can't get through to your planning, get trees integrated into local plans and things like that's a challenge. Tree officers will know that people, but there's always a reason that they don't like that particular tree. And then highways, getting the balance right between vehicles and parking and and all the things that highways engineers have to think about is quite a challenge. So talking to each other, talking to all of these people right from the beginning is really important to get a good start for your tree plan. I thought I'd use a couple of examples here about where the trees, perhaps something has gone wrong. This is at the Titanic quarter in Belfast, and I think there are about 100 of these. I think they're pin oaks planted. Now, I don't know what's happened here. I don't know whether they didn't have any aftercare, whether they were watered or not. They are on the dock here, so I don't know what the soil would have been like. I don't know whether they're just the wrong trees, but something has happened where they've put a lot of effort into planting the trees, but then something has gone wrong along the line. So making sure that you know exactly what's going in and what's wrong with things can really help save money in the long term, because all of these trees were like this. Now I've got another example from Sheffield. I love these trees. They are they are dawn redwoods that were planted probably about 15 to 20 years ago. And on the surface of it, they are having a lovely time living in these streets. They are, really bushy trees, loads of vitality. That huge column of tree will help cool the air underneath it. They provide that shade. They soften the environment. They are, they're really, really great. But the problem is that these are dawn redwoods and they grow at about 4 meters a year. So further down the road here, already some of them are having to be pruned every year to prune them away from something. The other thing is they're very keen to get away, and you can see that they're starting to lift up all the pavement along here. Now, they've only been in 15, 20 years, these trees, and what they're doing is finding where the water's falling off the infrastructure, and that's where they've sent their roots, so they're going along there. So, it's a problem because that's then starting to disrupt the highway, and there's trip hazards and things like that. So it could be that these weren't quite the right species to plant in the environment. So getting your species right, do they need more space to grow their roots? One could argue that, but then you'd have to go back to the drawing board to do that. So just to kind of reiterate, if you want trees to do well, you're an urban forest, you need to understand what you're doing. You need to understand what you've got and plan it properly. You need people that know what they're doing. You need the resources, and that's often a challenge for a lot of councils, to manage the risk and care for those trees, and making sure that people know what you're doing so they understand and kind of really help out where you're trying to get to. And just one last thing, just before we go, Malmo, I was there for the European Forum on Urban Forestry a couple of weeks ago. Amazing. It was amazing. So the trees are considered critical infrastructure. If you can see on the right here, look at that tree planted. Look at all the effort that's gone. 4 watering bags, amazing. And and they properly plan in with the lampposts and everything else. The trees, like where are the trees are going to go, as something they think about all the time. So trees and planters, they're all being looked after, watered, fantastic. So yeah, if you want to go and see somewhere where like there's a limited, lots of money and lots of drive for trees, then Sweden is the place. But we're not quite there yet in this country. So yes, but that is me. That's a very quick run through of the benefits of trees, and I'll pass back to Marybeth.
Thank you, Catherine. I think my favorite slide is "There's always a reason not to plant a tree." So great slide. And definitely the resource to care for them is a major issue. We will have time for questions at the end, but if anybody has a kind of a more driving question they'd like to throw in now, could you just unmute yourself and let us know? We just have a minute or two now. I think we're okay then. All right. Well, thank you, Catherine. We really appreciate it. That was a really interesting and valuable presentation. Like to move on now and introduce Mike Ripley, the Assistant Arboricultural Officer from Hampshire County Council Highways. Mike will talk about the vital role of procurement, getting it right for your project. So Michael, I'm going to turn it over to you. Introduce yourself and begin your presentation.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm Mike. I head up highways tree planting. Sorry, I'm just trying to
turn your camera on.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find my presentation for you.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Good.
Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Great.
Seems to have disappeared now. But
it was there, Mike, and then it disappeared when you tried to do full screen.
Right. Okay. Sorry, bear with me. I'll try again.
It's okay. We're all very relaxed tree people here. Don't worry.
That's right.
Just as well.
I think we've also had just about every technical issue ever on Zoom, and we've always found a way one way or the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, one of the other things I think about the benefits of trees are the sort of the economic benefits of increasing the value of real estate too. That's been documented.
Okay, have you got that now? I've got that on. I've shared.
I'm not seeing it.
You're not seeing anything, right?
Just see your name on screen, Mike.
Okay, that's a bit unfortunate.
We also don't see you.
Okay, I have got my video turned off. I didn't know whether that would.
I don't know. It may have something to do with it. Do you think it does?
Otherwise, Dee, have you got the presentation you could pop up for Mike?
Yeah, I could do that. Shall I do that?
Yeah, if you could, yeah, please, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so shall I just go with it and tell you when to change then, shall I?
Sure, yeah.
Would that work? All right, okay, so yeah, my apologies for that. My name's Mike Ripley. I'm part of the Hampshire Highways Arboriculture team. I lead on the highways tree planting. We're in a fortunate position on the highways because we do have a planting budget. We've also got access to CAVAT monies, which fund our sort of tree planting program, so we don't have to worry so much about applying for tree planting grants and sort of jumping through those sort of obstacles. We've been planting obviously for many decades, so we've always had a tree planting program, but we have increased it significantly over the last sort of 5 or 6 years. So if I could ask you to go to the next slide, please. Generally speaking, at the moment, we plant between sort of 2 and 2,500 standard trees per season. They're sort of usually 10 standards, and that's all over the county highway network. So we're covering all kinds of environments, urban, suburban, rural, coastal. So we've got every sort of and soil types as well, sort of clay, chalk, sands, and everything in between, and all those sort of really poor soils that you tend to get in highway environments. So that is the bulk of what we do. But we also do a number of sort of smaller type projects where we do a bit of whip planting. The image with the tree tubes in, that's near Blackbush Airport in the northeast of the county, near Farnborough. Reconfigured a roundabout there, had to clear a lot of trees, so we're replanting there now at the moment. Well, the last couple of years. It's a very challenging site, very sandy. It's like the Sahara in the summer, and it's waterlogged in the winter. So really difficult site to work on. But that's just to give you a bit of an idea of what we do. If we go for the next slide, please. So as Catherine alluded to before, we plant in a very specific environment, being the highways, and there's all kinds of limitations. Often you've got very small spaces to plant in, like I call these strip verges. You get in these sort of suburban areas. You're often dealing with signage, overhead utilities, visibility displays, and all kinds of things. So we generally need a very specific kind of tree that we can quite often sort of shoehorn into certain spaces. So we don't always have a large amount of accessible space. the idea was if if I'd been able to present my PowerPoint, I would have told you one by one the different kinds of planting. So you can see the first bullet point there is replacement tree planting. We always aim to replace trees whenever we take them out, because we do take out a lot of trees for safety and damage reasons, and we always try and replace if we can. Occasionally, with more rural stuff like ash dieback, we won't always be able to do that. Sometimes regeneration is a better option, especially in rural areas. But we have replanted ash dieback sites. We also have requests as well. We will take requests from residents where residents would like a tree. We'll, if there's a suitable verge outside the home, we're trying to accommodate them if we can. And we also have targeted sort of goal areas. These are pre-designated areas. These are pre-designated areas that we've identified as being in need of extra tree cover. So we're sort of talking about areas of high air pollution and high population density. I've just noticed a question flash up there. Do we try and replace the species that we take out? If appropriate, I suppose that's the best answer to that one. There are limits. Sometimes you get big trees and where everything's kind of grown up around them and it's become built around them, and they've, that sort of size of tree is no longer appropriate. You often get oak trees in sort of suburban and urban areas, and things have just grown up around them, and it's just not appropriate to try and put an oak tree back in there, because it was very different from when that, obviously when that tree was originally planted or grew there. But yeah, we just try and put something appropriate, and obviously, generally speaking, bigger species trees offer more benefits. But as you can, I'll allude to the next bit later. Obviously, we don't know what we're going to need to replace, and a lot of these targeted areas that we've got, because we've got such a huge area of infrastructure, we've got about 5,000 miles of network to plant in. Before we survey it, we don't know what was out there. Literally, don't know what's out there till we survey it, and that produces, some minor problems. But I'll get to them on the next slide. If you could change, please. So yeah, as I said before, the highway environment brings some quite specific issues that you've got to work around. You can see the lads there popping in a tree there. You've got overhead utilities going on there, subsurface utilities to sort of cope with as well. So we need to, a bulk of our trees are going to be those sort of smaller trees that are very durable and can deal with the various sort of soil issues and all the other kind of things that the urban environment's going to throw at them. And that again ties into the availabilities of what the nursery's actually got, because certain species, as I'm sure you all appreciate, are in very high demand. Go for the next slide, please. So the purpose of this presentation really was to talk just a little bit about how, just my experience is really of procuring trees. So as I alluded before, we don't know what's out there till we survey it. We've got Hampshire's about 9th biggest county in England. We've got a huge network. We've got to go out there and see what there is. But what we can't afford to do is to spend all summer finding places, choosing trees, and then going to the nursery in September saying, I want this, I want that, I want that, because it's not always going to be available. So what we do is advance purchase. And that's great because we can secure stock and we can plan, and it's great for the nursery as well because they can contract grow for us. But the problem with that is we're having to guess how many Sequoia-dendron giganteums do I dare buy. If I'm not feeling particularly confident, I'm going to end up, getting lots of flowering cherries and acer campestris and what have you. So it does produce a little bit of pressure on the confidence that we have. But yeah, advanced purchase is, yeah, I mean, to me, it's definitely the way forward, and that obviously helps us to avoid the problems of, you know, what's available on the market, what's popular, and what's available, because we can order ahead, and the nursery, you know, we can work with the nursery. We go for the next slide, please. So yeah, I mean, my advice is you know, get to know your nursery, work with your nursery. We've got some very good suppliers, but what I would say is, you know, go out there, visit your stock. You can identify issues before you get to them. You can talk to your nursery, and you can think about, you know, if you're being unrealistic, or you know, or certain things aren't achievable. Then you can talk it through, and you can avoid the problems you get, whereby the Arctic load turns up, and, you know, half your trees aren't suitable. You can try and cut off these problems at the pass. So I would definitely, yeah, get to know them. Depend on how many trees you get, and tag your trees if you can. But if you're buying enough trees, usually the nursery will put aside lines for you, so you have your own growing areas. So yeah, definitely get in there as much as you can. We're fortunate that one of our suppliers is local, so I can go there quite a few times through the growing season. But if you've got ones that are further afield, then, you know, I'll certainly try and get there at least once during the season. If you've got the next slide, please. Obviously, once you get to the point at which you're going to take delivery, you got to think about timing. We use container grown stock. For me, that is all round the best option, because it broadens the window. We can start planting from the stroke of midnight on the 1st of October, and if conditions allow and we need to do it, we're getting a cool wet April, we could go straight through to April if we needed to do it. We don't want to plant that long usually. But yeah, if we can, you know, get those trees in there. So you want to think about when you're, you know, as soon as you get your trees in, but you also need to think about how long are those trees going to be sat around before you get a chance to plant them. So space-wise, ideally, if you've got enough space, I would certainly recommend try and get all your trees in at once. It just makes life an awful lot easier. Sometimes in the past we've not had enough space, so we've had to phase it over a few deliveries, which can make things a bit difficult, because you start running out of trees until you get to the next phase. My other bit of advice, really just from a personal point of view, is get yourself down the yard. If you physically can, get in the back of the trailer and help the lads unload it. You can tell an awful lot about your trees just by picking them up. Obviously, if you're picking trees up and they're pulling out the bags, you know, that possibly they don't have a particularly good fibrous root system. But you see a hell of a lot more picking them up, handling them, just getting your hands dirty, you know, rather than waiting for them all to be unloaded and then trying to see what's going on, because as the saying goes, you won't see the wood through the trees sometimes. So yeah, get in there, get amongst it, and that's when you pick up the defects, rather than, you know, a couple of days later when you're walking down the lines, you think, well, you know, what's that? Again, check. It sounds a bit obvious, but check your delivery note when they're getting unloaded, and you're getting feathered trees, and you've asked for standards. You need to be checking that against the delivery note, because quite often that's, you know, that's the obvious thing, but perhaps the nursery hasn't delivered what you're expecting. It's a busy time for nurseries, you know, during winter time, and when they're loading up trailers, you know, things do get missed. Again, check the labels. Does the label say what it should be? Check against the delivery notes. It's just dotting the I's and crossing the T's, really. Go for the next slide, please. Just a few things here. Obviously, no names, no shames. Nurseries generally do a really good job, but again, this is why you need to get in there, get in amongst those trees, get your hands dirty. as you see there, left hand side there, you've got a girdle root system. Obviously, that should have been picked up at the nursery, or certainly when it's being loaded. Another tree there in the middle, got this huge woody root bursting out the bottom of the container. Again, that's not ideal, obviously. We also picked this one up on the right hand side. I can't remember what the insect was, some kind of boring beetle, not one of the scary ones. But again, these are the sort of things that should be getting picked up at the nursery. And this is where it's good to have a good relationship with the nurseries. You need to obviously feed these things back to the nursery. If I could ask for the next slide, please. Again, here's another incredible one we picked up a few years ago. Obviously, standard trees meant to have a branch crown structure, I believe, but this thing was like several meters long. And it's more like it's not even a feather maiden, is it? But these are the sort of things that should be getting picked up, and you need to be picking these things up as they're coming off the trailer. That way, you can raise them with the nurseries. If I could go for the next slide, please. So I'm a bit aware, so we're probably approaching the end here, time-wise. Just to summarise, yeah, I would certainly advise you to advance purchase if you can. It does bring certain problems if you're not completely familiar with the infrastructure you're dealing with, or the nature. But the advantages certainly outweigh the disadvantages. Again, visit your nursery, build a relationship, talk to them, get yourself round there. You can ask them questions, help to understand why things are the way they are. Get used to what there's certain species always look scrappy at the nursery. It's just the way they grow, the sort of formative pruning that they get. But if you can learn that, it'll help to avoid any sort of misunderstandings. And again, inspect your stock during the growing season, and inspect your stock as they're coming off the trailer, and feed back to the nursery. And that way, that sort of exchange of ideas and experiences, and you're going to get a lot more out of it. So I believe I've done about 15 minutes there, so I apologise for the messing about at the beginning, but yeah, I hope that was of some use to people.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that was very interesting. I find it interesting that you focus so much on the nursery. Do you know that Urban&Civic bought a tree nursery last year specifically to secure the availability? We have Todd's Nursery in the Bedford area now as part of our holdings, and they're using a lot of air pots. Have you had much experience with air pots? I noticed one of the comments was about the girdling roots and containers and challenges with containers.
We don't tend to do a lot with air pots. We tend to sort of associate that with most of what we use are sort of 8-10, so the smaller stocks. They probably only had about a season or two in the bag. We deliberately use smaller stuff because it just establishes. It's just easier to establish, and it's easier to handle sort of highways type stuff.
Yeah, and they have a better form when you plant them small too. I think they always just come out over the long term better looking. Does anyone else have any sort of driving questions for Mike before the sort of end of the question set? Anybody want to?
Yeah, I do. I could ask what if it's okay. Mike, when you're planting trees, particularly in the urban environment on the roadside and so on, do you consider the possibility that those trees may in the future cause subsidence to buildings adjacent?
Yes, we get a fair bit of subsidence in certain concentrated parts of Hampshire. So yeah, we're usually aware of what the subsidence hotspots are. So yeah, we do think about that. But then again, having said that, how many? I think we get something like, I don't know, a dozen claims for subsidence per annum, over about 500,000 properties, I believe there are in Hampshire. So I don't know, we try and put that in perspective without being reckless, if that.
No, I was just thinking if you select the trees differently in those areas, you'd select different species. That's just a
Yeah, if we know somewhere, yeah, we have got certain areas with real subsidence hotspots, and we have chosen what we know to be sort of low water demands, especially as replace, where we've removed trees for subsidence, we're replacing trees. Yeah, we always put a low water demand. They tend to be like magnolia, cobus, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay.
Marybeth, I noticed one question from Paul Osborne. I don't know if he wants to ask it himself, or shall I just quickly read it out? Paul, are you there?
Hi, Sue. I'm there.
Yeah.
Very happy to ask it.
Yes, thank you.
Hi, Mike. I'm down in Devon. I work for local authority down here, but we find, and I think from others having similar experiences, that our local highway authority is very reluctant to support tree planting either by private developers or themselves, and are focused more on maintenance issues and perceived safety concerns. And I wondered how you have managed to kind of build a consensus and secure budgets to plant street trees, as you're doing excellently in Hampshire.
I mean, we're very fortunate. I mean, we are the highway authority. I think we've got a very proactive in sort of acquiring caveat monies, whereby developers reconfigure the highway and we lose highways trees. So we've got our team's very proactive in recovering monies there to fund tree planters. I guess it's just a general attitude and culture that we have within the authority here. So yeah, I guess we're just quite fortunate in that sense.
Yeah, that's actually great. That's terrific. Anyone else? We have just a couple of minutes. If there's another,
there was one other from Gary Ellis. If Gary's there, or shall I just ask it?
Go ahead.
It's how do you undertake any aftercare? Is it in-house or do you use contractors?
Aftercare, we do use a contract, but we've got a highway service contract, so it's the same contractor subcontractor that we work with, do all the tree work. So although it's contracted, it's we're very close. I'm constantly down the yard talking to them. We usually do about 3 to 4 seasons of maintenance. The planting, the initial planting cost includes the first year of maintenance plus a certain amount of watering visits. So yeah, we have MAP 16 as a management system. So we're able to generally keep track of all our trees and and subsequent maintenance and removing stakes and what have you.
Can I pop in there a question? How's your sort of success rate?
It's pretty good. I mean, going back to 2021, we had a real bad drought season. We lost about 5%, which is not to say we didn't lose more in subsequent seasons, but obviously, we're 95% was still deemed viable to carry on. So it's generally, we audit them after the first season, but we did do the previous 2 seasons, but it's just such a labor intensive thing to get around all the trees. But because we are constantly maintaining, we do pick up the failures sort of later on, so they're not forgotten about.
Naomi's got her hand up.
Yeah, I'm perplexed about this use of container grown. There's so many documented problems with container grown, and nobody has the time to do root washing in order to unwrap what invariably is going on in the center of the container, which no matter what you do, you're not getting to without unraveling the entire container's root ball. So why not field grown?
I think at the end of the day, I only go off our sort of personal experience, but you're gonna have a similar issue with a root ball. You don't know what's going on in there. We just take it, at the end of the day, root balls are heavy, they're difficult to handle. You've got a short planting window. Likewise with bare root. Our personal experience is that container grown have worked better for us. That's.
But for how many years? What's your measurement?
We've been planting for decades.
Before those girdling roots come back and bite you in the proverbial.
Yeah, well, I mean, that girdle root was through a sort of a failure in the nursery to repot that tree on. So, we, you know, I inspect the trees, I pull them out of the bags, and that kind of thing. So, I mean, there's only a certain limited amount to what you can do, but we've been planting for many. My predecessor was in the job for about 30 odd years. I've been in the job for about 5 or 6 years. Yeah, we just, it's not particularly scientific, but we just work off what we see. Good quality container, good container root trees. You can see they've got a good fibrous root system. If you are seeing girdling roots, then obviously there's an issue with the production, and we won't plant them.
I'd like to move on because I'm the timekeeper. So thank you very much, Naomi, for that question. It's got a lot of interest. And Paul, I would ask that you could maybe hold your question to the end. And thank you, Mike, very much. That was a really interesting presentation. And we'll move on now. And I'd like to introduce Lee Heykoop, the technical manager for the sustainability team at Homes England. And Lee is going to talk about a standard for planting trees in living landscapes. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Lee.
Thank you very much. Now, let's see. What's my technical problem going to be? Let's see. Okay. Oh, yeah, that's okay. Although I clicked on the wrong thing. Let's just see. Yeah. Okay, good. Hello, and thank you very much, Marybeth, and hello, everybody. Yes, that's my role title. I'm a landscape architect, and before, as I've been a landscape architect for over 20 years, before that I was a garden designer and had my own specialist plant nursery, not trees, just interesting plants. And I have been working on a tree standard. It's not ready yet. I'm just trying to put this somewhere else so I can see it better. This image is the one really that kind of, I thought, I need to do something about this now. It was so every year, myself and some colleagues go around sites doing Building for a Healthy Life review, only a handful of sites. And I started to clock in these dead and dying trees. But on this particular site, there were, it was a nice landscape design, and that suds there, it's big, sort of quite nice, generously wide, linear park, and the suds was well planted. But the trees around, there were 80 newly planted trees, only 18 were alive, 62 were dead or dying, and that was pretty appalling. So that has kind of, oh, now, hang on, I'm going to have to adjust my settings because I'm on the wrong setting. I'm just going to stop sharing and reshare. I tried this beforehand, but I can't see my notes, so that's odd. Okay, let's close that now. Okay, and now share. Try that again. Hopefully it'll come up okay this time. One of these should have, oh, that's horrible. I can't see my notes. It's because one of my screens should have my notes on. And it did the other day. It worked the other day. And now it's not. Side by side. Content only. It's content only, isn't it? Yes. Okay, share. Right. I'm going to have to wing it because I don't have my notes. Super irritating.
Lee, do you want me to share it from my side so you can see your notes?
Oh, okay. Yes, that would be great. And I'll tell you, yes, that would be great. And I shall put it up on my screen so I can see my notes, and you can be sharing it. That's great. You can share the PDF. Yeah.
Oh.
Have you got that? Have you got that, Dee? Actually, I think I clicked on the wrong PowerPoint thing. So I think I know the answer to it if you're not there yet.
Okay, you try one more time, Lee, and if not,
Okay.
I can have a go.
Okie dokie. Yeah. Okay. Come on, share. Have you got, what have you got here? Have you got?
We've got, you know, we've got the full thing.
Have you?
Yes.
Oh, yes, you have.
Have you got your notes?
That's really weird. Actually, could you? Because now it's not showing on both screens, which is super irritating. But if you could share the PDF, then I will get up for myself and see my notes. So if you can put it onto that, the first image with the 80 newly planted trees on.
Is that right then?
So I can't see I'm looking now at, and I've got it on both screens, so I can't see what you're seeing, but oh, hang on, I probably can. Yes, that's correct. Yes, great stuff. Okay. Sorry, everybody. So yes, and I should start off by saying they're going to be unremittingly depressing photos today of a lot of dead and dying trees. But anyway, this piece of work, working on a tree standard for Homes England. This is work that Sue James at TDAG, so Sue here, right here today, has been working on with me, and she's convened expert content on it. So it's going to be super exciting when it's out. We were looking at the roles, you know, what's happening? Why are things going wrong? Who's involved? Who has responsibility and accountability for tree planting? And the more we thought about it, the more, you know, each of these roles actually encompasses vital work towards planting trees to a healthy establishment. And there are so many things, for example, site vision, detailed site understanding, the program, the site traffic and soil conditions. All these things are cross-cutting across many of these roles. Next slide, please. Can you tell me when you got it up? Because I can't see your screen.
It's up.
Yep.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And I should get, yeah, there we go. So knowing what to avoid, of course, is always helpful. It's always good to know the negative. And these are things that I've come across. I haven't diagnosed exactly who's done what wrong, but I have found that each of those roles on the previous screen have been responsible for major failures. You know, I've had across my desk specifications, that is, the contract documents themselves are not fit for purpose and would cause the death of a tree. For example, a drawn detail of a tree pit that is a metre deep, planted with topsoil, whereas what we know is, you know, that topsoil's got its microorganisms in, and they need oxygen, and they're going to die and become anaerobic and make it toxic for tree roots, and the tree's going to die, that kind of thing. So it's good to know, you know, what to avoid. And of course, that means that there has to be an understanding of tree morphology and what happens if you don't avoid these. These are common errors that happen frequently, I would say. Next slide, please. Can you say when you've got that?
Okay, go.
Great. And the flip side of that is knowing what you want to achieve. Have you got a vision beyond the decorative? Really, now in this time of climate crisis and biodiversity crisis, we need to be thinking not just aesthetics. And I would say you need to think of tree health first. So thinking about that tree health, you know, where on the site will your trees live happy long lives? You know, do you understand your site well enough to know that, the hydrology of the site? Where should you put the damp lovers or not, if it's not, if there's no sort of, you know, natural dampness and water underneath, you know, which species are going to be drought tolerant, and think, you know, come away from that, you know, all too often used avenues. If you do have avenues, why not have mixed species? Because we're going to be needing to have a sort of wider range of species on a site, because they could all be affected by something coming along, like the avenue of is it horse chestnut trees on Streatham Common. So think about all those things, and then also think about what trees are doing for people. And of course, Catherine talked about this very well. We need them, I mean, I think when we get those extreme high temperatures, that's when it really focuses our minds of like going from the shade of one tree to another. Really important to design those into every social space, and trees near to workplaces and housing to bring that ambient temperature down and do all those other ecosystem services that trees do. Have them along the walking and cycling routes. When it's 40 degrees centigrade, you're not going to be wanting to walk if you don't have any shade. And also thinking about a certain quantum of large trees I'm thinking of quite a big development site here. So not all those small and medium-sized trees. Larger trees give us more ecosystem services. And think programming means actually thinking about the connections between the roles that started on the first slide and the process involved in tree planting. It's not a do and done approach. And I'll go on to more of that a bit later. Next slide, please.
Okie dokie.
Thanks. Totally essential is for everyone to learn more about soil, unless you already are a soil expert. So this slide here it's near our Birmingham office, and there's it's too long a row for me to take the whole lot, but and it's very hard to see dead trees, but there are a lot of dead trees here. Anyway, there are 12 dead multi-stem birch trees. One is alive. Further behind me where I took that photograph, but then there's another one dead beyond that. And where the alive tree is obviously more soil depth. The paving sort of slopes down, and the retained bit is higher. Now, I dare say that the soil depth is deeper than we can see there, not just from the paving up to that little bit, but it is a podium planting. And I think that probably, they died last summer. So the drought, and I'd say not having sufficient rootable depth is probably the cause of the death of those. But on the positive side about soil, really important to do all the soil surveys you need on a site. Really important also to think of the biodiversity potential of the soil itself and to nurture that along and to use that positively on your site. And think of the ecosystem services of the soil, the potential of that soil. Planting pits, yes, that common error of putting topsoil too deep. So 300 to 4 millimeter depth max is what our tree standard will be saying. And also very much thinking not just the tree pit, but beyond it, the surrounding soil, what's happening there. So fundamentally, trees need that soil, they need the air, they need the water, and they need the space for their roots as well as above ground. And what happens when there's compaction, particularly in heavy soils, you're going to get saturated soils. And in their compacted, saturated soils, trees won't be able to take that water up because they haven't got they're not able to function properly without the air that they need. Next slide, please.
Yep. Okay.
Really, thank you. Really important to know about site operations, and a little bit of that was mentioned before. So in our tree standard, there's going to be future tense, toolbox talk film on planting trees for a healthy establishment. And it's going to be about 20-25 minutes, and another follow-on one on management and maintenance. And this is key because all too often that fails. But yeah, key to think of those site operations, handling the trees on site. This comes back to program again, doesn't it? Making sure that it's not beyond the wit of man and women to align the programming of the trees delivery to the practicalities of the site, and to not do that at the last minute, so that it really does need proper planning and thinking. Once you understand the importance of this, it becomes much easier to do these important functions. If you think it's not very important, it's probably going to be at the bottom of your to-do list, isn't it? This picture here, that's a photo taken by a colleague, so I didn't see that site. Why those two trees are dead, I'm not sure. But look, there's no mulch around them. The grass goes right up to the stems, and it wouldn't surprise me if that's strimmer damage, which is a common failure as well. Yes, we talked about the planting emphasis. There's going to be more on that, of course, in the tree standard itself and in the film. Next slide, please.
Okie dokie.
Thanks. I mean, there's more essential knowledge, and it's important for everybody to keep up with recent research. So continuing professional development, which of course needs to build on a core understanding to begin with. But I think, it's such an exciting time because there's so much interesting research coming out, particularly these ones that I'm mentioning here. And I'll just mention a tiny bit more of them in that, the Martin and Soman one is evaluating urban tree population fitness for a changing climate, and they're using a climate moisture index, which is really, really super interesting. And then the Hirons, Watkins and Martin one, I don't actually put the title here, do I? But it's they're working towards a biodiversity metric for urban tree species. And very interestingly, they're taking a number of different markers, if you like, for evaluating that biodiversity metric. So to put this into context, some of the early work on which trees are more important for biodiversity perhaps used too few, and they're not giving the full picture. So take that with a pinch of salt, or just read the recent research. So they're taking they take 4 markers, if you like, 4 important categories: the importance of trees, co-evolution with native fauna, tree features that are important for supporting wildlife, the value of the species as a host for insects, and the likely resilience to future climate scenarios. So it's going to give a very well-rounded view. And of course, with changing climatic geographies and the need to punch high on biodiversity for nature recovery, which is absolutely essential in this biodiversity and climate crisis, and on ecosystem services, this means that tree selection should prioritize these considerations above aesthetics. We need to, I'm not saying aesthetics are not important anymore, but we need to think of these other things first and then aesthetics. So yes, the ecosystem services, the second bullet point down here, is thinking of the trees themselves and how they've flourished and where they will live really good, healthy lives. And understanding that when we say, well, trees give us this stuff, they give us these benefits. Well, some of the benefits they don't give when they're stressed, when they're drought stressed. So they will not be cooling, air cleansing, or sequestering carbon when they're drought stressed and their stoma close up during those periods. So it's really important to think about that very carefully. I would also say that natives and non-natives and nature recovery are, it's more important to think of the biodiversity potential. That matters more than whether a tree is native or not. And to also consider tree sizes at maturity, not go for 2. I mentioned that previously, not stick with the safe middle and small sizes. And to think of seasonal spread. And of course, that links into aesthetics as well, but think of seasonal spread for the, all those other things that are relying on that tree, as well as people. Next slide, please.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm going to disagree with our previous speaker. Planting early is so important. One contractor I met said, yes, before Christmas is what they try and do. November to early February is what our tree standard is saying. And I think, and in my experience, trees do make a little bit of root growth. They settle in winter. They're much better able to take on their first summer if they've been planted earlier. Ditto replacements. So the tree standard is going to be requiring that. And responsive maintenance. And of course, this comes up against one of those roles that was on the first slide at the beginning as the quantity surveyor. Who would have thought the quantity surveyor is so important in tree planting? Well, of course, they estimate the time it takes to plant a tree and the time it takes to water a tree, and they cost that up, and that's driving things. And quantity surveyors need to learn more about tree planting. They need to know this stuff. We must be going forward having responsive maintenance and watering accordingly, not to a set schedule that was probably drawn up about 10 or 20 years ago. And, you know, you can think that in the wet summer of 2024, there wouldn't have been a need for so much watering, whereas last year we should have had a whole lot more. Really, really important. And of course, people will say, but what about the cost of that watering? And I've been told that the main cost is actually bringing the water onto site. So why don't we start considering about that access to water on site? Why don't we start having water tanks below ground that fill up with the winter rain, and then that's available for precisely this purpose? So it's really thinking about quality, not just numbers. And hopefully BNG will make a difference here, because conditions should be being measured. Not quite sure who will be doing that. But a question here, because I'm not sure that our skills, going back to all those roles and all that they need to know, I'm not sure that skills are lagging too far behind this whole system approach that tree planting really is demanding. We need to do so much more. So to sum up, really, and I just should say, really, tree planting is done well on a lot of sites, particularly urban and civic, I should say, but a lot of sites it's done very well. But often it isn't. How can we improve that knowledge and skills I've talked about? But I mean, that is a total uphill battle. How do we get that knowledge and skills across? And I also think we need joined up working across all those roles. I also think professional bodies need to be active. The Landscape Institute should do more, in my opinion. Did you know that to become a chartered member of the Landscape Institute, you don't need to know anything about plants? So that would be a start, is to turn that around. The JCLI contract, which has a standard planting season of November to the end of March, which I think the Landscape Institute have a key role in that one. I think that should change to early February, as previously mentioned. I would like the Institute of Clerk of Works to be more, to have more heft, but that relies on clients demanding it, on developer clients paying for it, which I have heard often they don't and won't, or will only a small amount, and it needs landscape clerks of works who, again, this goes back to the skills and knowledge. And I think also monitoring, wouldn't it be great to have that as standard and not exceptional? So essentially, there's a shift from, I would like to see a shift from tree numbers planted to thinking of establishing healthy trees. And I'm just going to end with a quote apparently attributed to Einstein. So a colleague told me the other day, not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts. Next slide.
Thank you, Lee.
Thank you.
Really good. Listen, we really look forward to the tree standard being released. So I'm assuming that will come out on the internet and be available to the public.
That's the idea.
Yeah, that sounds terrific. We will not be taking questions at the moment. We do need to move along at this time. And so I'd like to thank you very much for your talk, and we'll move and save your questions to the end. There'll be a little bit of time, hopefully. And I'd like to move right into introducing Mark Syrett, Place Directorate of Surrey County Council, who will talk about planting in hard landscapes and some experimental evidence. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to you, Mark.
Okay, you'll just sort out the slideshow. Bear with me.
Okay.
I've got no notes, so this could go absolutely anywhere.
Well, sometimes it's the best way, right?
Okay,
Honestly.
Can you give me a verbal you can see that?
We don't see anything yet.
That's not good. Okay.
Okay.
Let me unshare.
I think another observation that I could make from Lee's talk is that, you know, you were talking about keeping up with research, and it seems like with climate change, things are accelerating and moving so fast that it's something we have to do more all the time now because of the amount of change. Okay, let's go then, Mark. We've got your presentation up. Thank you.
You can see it. Let me just go from the slideshow then.
We just need full screen.
Yeah. That's where it disappeared last time when it went to full screen. You still got it?
Now we've got your notes, I think, on the right.
Yeah, you need to change your display settings at the top, I think it is.
Bear with me.
So I think it's swap.
That's it.
Okay.
Well done.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so just as my colleagues Frank and Robbie are watching this isn't in Surrey, and just for Mike, this isn't in Hampshire either, but I just thought I'd put that in there. I won't say where it is, but it just says we can't keep doing what we've always done. So what I wanted to cover was, I don't know how many people viewed the original presentation I did 4 years ago, where we were putting in the Stockholm tree pit and crate comparison survey. At the time I was working for Brighton. I'm now working for Surrey, lead local flood authority. Anyone wants to put a thumbs up when if they remember the old one, which we videoed live from site while they were going in. So it was just to look at the overview, what we did for those that didn't, to look at the kind of the process that we went through, where we are to date as part of the comparisons, which is really actually quite exciting. The lessons we've learned and where we've kind of shaved value for the bits we've done subsequent, and then look at where we're going kind of after this, hopefully going forwards. And if we've got time for questions at the end, or we'll do it right at the very end, I'll leave you to drive that for me. So looking at Brighton, we pretty difficult flood particular area, a Victorian infrastructure, no river outflow to the sea, everything flowing down to the front, and a lot of sort of post-war 50s, 60s development sitting higher up in the catchment. So fundamental problems, and what we wanted to look at was what systems were available that we weren't using, what could we test, what could we do. So having looked at the catchment analysis, we needed to do something a little bit different. Our wanted solutions to better street trees, too small tree pits, not enough longevity, and really losing good healthy trees to increasing high winds off the channel when in full leaf, and the bases were getting damper in the autumns than they had been previously. So disappointing to lose a really healthy elm specimen when you are the national collection. Highways wanted a solution to the surface water flooding with the combined sewer, predominantly all combined across the whole authority. So off I went to go and do a bit of research after being nudged down into the direction of Bjorn Embren's work. So here we have a 2013 top slide of Stoneham Park, and below is a 2024 with the tree pits in. We had a problem effectively. The Muga was 200 children in the morning go absolutely bananas playing football in that. As much noise as you could possibly make in one small park per square metre, possibly the most used park that there was in Brighton, and certainly the most enjoyed. And you can see in the top where there's a little child sandpit, that's a toddler's play area. In 2013, there was a large elm that shielded that. Note that location, that is really very important. It was a decent size and did provide a fair amount of shade for the area. And along the road, there's a whole line of elms, and up against the house, if you can see my cursor against this house here, there's a couple of elms and elms down here. Scroll forward to 2024 and brand new Muga's gone in. It's shrunk. It left a big pile of tarmac and a bill of something like, don't quote me, but about 160,000 legal bill for the house that was saying it makes too much noise and too many footballs coming over. This is a house that was next to the park when they bought it, but there we go. You can also see that the toddler's play area has been remodeled, and what was keeping the sand in now isn't keeping the sand in at all, and sand and suds are not great bedfellows. Having said that, it materially changed the colour of the tarmac. This was done after the trees had gone in, so actually some of the cooling for the tarmac was done by the sand itself. So what we put in was a comparative test. We put in size match trees. Luckily, Ben had pre-ordered a whole pile of resistant elm trees from Bartram's, and we put in two control trees. One was standard council watering strategy, and bear in mind this was 2020. This is the year of our 40 degrees, so it was actually probably double our standard strategy because we had to tag team to get some of the watering done, as it was the soil conditions, the soil moisture deficit was so high it needed kind of an extra pair of hands of doing it. There was luckily, which we hadn't noticed until actually even after we finished planting everything, there was another tree of exactly the same species planted the year before that never made it onto our track, and we'd forgotten about it and it hadn't been watered. So we said, okay, well, let's continue not watering it and see what happens. So we've got the two extremes in soil, watered and unwatered. The remainder of the trees were in tarmac in varying scenarios that we were then putting them up against. This was a Dutch elm disease present site, and we did decide to put all resistant elms in, primarily to test the resistance of the elms. If you were being logical, you'd have put multiple varieties in and you wouldn't have put elms in. But in essence, what we did here was to say, well, okay, let's give this the hardest possible test we can. Trees in tarmac, minimum amount of soil, minimum amount of kind of water potential that they've got. So the ACO and Green Blue Urban sponsored the crates, so we didn't. They supplied those as part of the monitoring and ongoing value elements, and on advice from Ed Burton's, our contractors, they said when we put crates in, 9 times out of 10 we find a whole pile of services and goodness knows what that we kind of scratch our heads and work out what to do. So we thought, okay, why don't we put a hybrid system where we're putting Stockholm mix around the outside of the crate, because we don't know what the roots are doing kind of 5-10 years time within a crate. Will it girdle just the same inside a crate? Will they spread out? And can we get extra weighting, extra water retention? And if we have a situation where we end up with constrained services that we didn't know about, can we use the Stockholm mix around a preconceived crate system? So we wanted to test pretty much everything we possibly could. Pits were initially at 15 cube, but we went out after some advice to 30 cube and kept some at 15 cube on the basis that a 15 cube tree pit, when it's 1.2 deep, the deepest you can go with the digger without needing to shore the sides up, if the roots penetrated into the soil around it, that's actually 30 cube anyway. So we thought let's see the difference and see what a slightly smaller than British standard size tree would do, and work out the scenarios that might come into play with that. So going back to this kind of toddler playground, it was getting to 50 degrees. There were bits of it you couldn't use, bits of metal you couldn't sit on. And sand was going everywhere. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but the water flow path comes down around the curved fence, and there's a soakaway historically in this area here. Water from this side comes around the Muga and disappears and travels down through and then back to the soakaway. So the location of the trees was as per you would if you were a hydraulic designer, and we picked up the flow paths of the water to maximize the watering scenarios rather than the shade scenarios. If we were doing shade, we'd have put them just along this fence line here, but actually I was asked, could I turn this bit of tarmac into a nature trail, which even for me was a bit of a challenge. So we had already lost from the first over and under the 2 elm trees through root transmission that were next to the house, and we've subsequently lost this lovely big one up in the corner as well. That I think went last year. So we know at some point transmission is almost likely going to travel along the roadside and unshade the Muga, but we'll keep that thought for later on. Because of the amount of tarmac we had, the thought process was, how do we get something valuable out of what is effectively a significant cost to us? And we decided that by putting in the Stockholm tree pits, we could actually bring our highways department, our highways engineering, show them what we're doing, why we're doing it, bring them into every stage. So actually we could show it's replicable if we wanted to plant trees into the gutter. And that's with our thought process, and doing that without scaring the engineers. And to my surprise, they were bang up for it. So you can see from the crates that we started off, they were all 15 cube before we modified them. Lumps of concrete on the top of the old posts from the Muga, where they were still below concrete. We dug those out. But this was an old pig farm. Decent depth of tarmac, decent depth of sub base, lower bit of chalk, which was probably capping over the old pig farm when it was playground park was first put in. Then a load of made up ground, then another load of what was probably historic rubbish before the farm was built, and then into subsoil down to 1.2 depth. This is nicely excavated and graded out at the bottom. What I've learned subsequently is actually just leave the tooth bucket on, leave the sides rough, leave the bottom rough, and you increase the percolation kind of coefficients into the areas. So without scaring the highways engineers, we went off to look at Bjorn Embren's work. I'd already had a look at his YouTube stuff and see if we could translate that into what we did, predominantly to reduce capacity in the combined sewer, and also to make sure that any polluted highway runoff didn't go straight into the aquifer without it having some kind of filtrant in it. So including the biochar in the structural soils, in the kind of answer of the question between should you plant early, should you plant late, as Harry Hill would say, there's only one way to decide this fight. By modifying the water retention characteristics of the soils, then in essence, you're putting back the clock for climate change. We could plant trees just into the soil themselves 10 years ago, and they were guaranteed to survive. Now they are guaranteed to die, and that's the difference we've got. So this is doing something different. I was talking to Kevin from Q last week after an event, and he's obviously selecting trees for greater drought type tolerance that have experienced the wetter winters and the drier summers. And I said, well, actually, I'm going the other direction. I'm looking at how we retain the moisture within the soil. So it isn't a water tank, the soil itself becomes a water tank, and the biochar holds onto that water. It holds 325% of its weight in water, and combining that in it, we'll go through all the miracles of it later on. We knew the crates were better going in, but if we didn't know they could be used in the road. We didn't know whether the systems, whether the structural soils around them, and whether services would be more difficult when we put through. The trees, so that we intercepted the natural surface flows to make sure that the pressure from the soakaway drains and infiltration with the play sand was absolutely minimised. The park itself didn't have a flooding issue, it was over chalk, but the reality is we wanted to maximise that process. So here are some pictures just to kind of talk you through. These were taken at the time when we were installing from the original video. If we go top left, one of the things that we've learned is we brought the biochar in bags, and the mixing time when the rail track ballast used, which was the stone, that was a 40 to 60 no fines aggregate. If you're putting it into a roadway, you need that granite for your granite to granite to make the deflection tests. The mixing from bags took a long time. What we've discovered subsequently is actually either pre-mixing the stuff and having brought in pre-made, or actually mix it in the hole itself and keep the whole job neater and tidier, and particularly when we're working in schools and playgrounds and bits like that, which is what we're doing now for the majority of them. We're bringing the biochar in bulk now, and we also have it now made in Surrey. So this came down from Shropshire, from Mick Jones, if any of you follow him, his site, Carbon Farmer, and Shropshire County Council now have a joint venture with him producing this stuff. That came down from there to start with. I'm buying it locally now from Brockham in Dorking, and I've got a very short haul for what we're doing now. If we move to the top right, then this was a raised, we did 2 raised gabions, and I used some brickwork waste just to kind of make it look a little bit circular economy. And that worked reasonably efficiently. We're using the concrete root formers to get the right depth of and the right size of soil, so we don't have too much depth soil. There is structural soil below those concrete formers down to 1.2. It's about 400 in those. But one of the things I did notice after putting these in, and the logistics of getting them there was a bit tricky, but they do effectively form an absolutely tight hydraulic kind of bond around the tree. So one of the things, the beauty of the structural soil is it moves with the roots, so you don't get the pavement lifting. And if you put the concrete around it, I don't know whether you're going to get that in the future. So the ones I've done subsequently to test them, I've made that out of Osmo board, had it lying in the skip, didn't have much of a budget for one, so I knocked up the same thing, same size, on the basis that 3 years' time it's turned to Weetabix. The roots have formed through the holes that we've cut, and then you won't get the lifting as the wood deforms. Might be right, might be wrong. If it's cheaper, we'll find out, and we've got the comparisons with the site to see. The other beauty that we had using the muckaway lorries, we were very confined for space, so we basically had to load muck away or bring material in and then load muck away on the same loads. And what we found is I got a cost 25% cheaper than our framework haulage contractors. He came in at 6 in the morning. He was the company owner. He had to keep his HGV hours up, so I had to get onto site at 6 rather than 7:30. But in essence, that was good from health and safety, because there was no one in the park. At 8 o'clock, there's 200 kids in the park, and you don't want to grab lorry with 200 kids. So one of the things we found is muck in, muck out was a very efficient way of actually doing that, and then getting the lorry to work longer hours, having a second driver, again, gave us quite a big cost advantage. Bottom right picture, that's the green blue going in. One of the things we did discover between the two systems is that the speed of soil fill made a lot of difference, because the contractor cost was a very large proportion of the actual site fees. So, but top and bottom right hand sides, one of the things that we found that was most important as we were finishing off was making sure that the deflection tests and the consolidation was right, because they were having permeable tarmac going on to them. And we started off, we looked at whacker plates from the videos, and we knew that they wouldn't be strong enough. So we went down the standard tarmac roller, and we couldn't make the deflection test. Nice simple test, which is a lovely one to do. Get a tennis ball, bounce it out of your hand. If it comes back to your hand, you're not far away. If it doesn't come back up to hand height, you need to keep compacting more. It's a real simple test, and it works pretty accurately. We brought back in, when the contractors came back, I lost them for 2 or 3 weeks to another job. I had to pull off the site and came back to finish as we were short on some material. And they brought back the Bomag machine. This is what Bjorn never had originally. And they come now built in with, I'm going to say, foolproof system, where it has a metal on metal ring. Once the vibration hits the point where the consolidation of the site is enough to meet the highways, there's no way of doing it really any other way, but you need a bigger machine. We couldn't lift that machine in with a 1.5 ton. We needed a 5 ton machine to lift that in and out of the, because you still consolidate it in 2 or 3 level loads. We brought the deflection testing guy in, and we got to a point where we could show that we'd met a motorway standard specification. So you could drive Arctic lorries, buses, anything you like over that permeable tarmac. The roots will still move within the structural soil below. They will still move into the voids and the spaces. The water still works by capillary action. And you'll see the effect on the trees in a second. So this was at this spring. I wanted to go literally at leaf burst, just to see if there's any difference between the different pits. It was actually reasonably consistent. I would have said that if there was days between it, I would probably be overemphasizing it. But on the basis that these trees came in when they were planted as 10-12s, the mover itself is 3 meters high. These are sitting at pretty much near 6 meters 4 years in, and have more than doubled their girth. Now, interestingly enough, the tree in the foreground is the one that's planted on the site of the old tree, and trees hate going on a site where they were before. They really don't normally do. When Keith Saker and Dean Bowie inspected last year, the crates were in front of the Stockholm tree pits, which is what we would expect. You've got a lot more compost, a lot more material for the roots to kind of spread out and get early growth into. By this spring, so only 1 year later, the Stockholm tree pits, which are nearest the largest water supply, and I think that's probably the reason for it, no other, are now about 10% in front of the two crate pits. All of the trees on site, crates and Stockholm, bar the one that's still got the tree mesh in the background next to the mural, and that one's the 15 cube tree pit. The other raised gabins are 30 cube. That one's about 25% less, but it's got a bit of competition from a cherry tree. The cherry tree itself was pretty much dead in 2020, and we kind of thought, well, if the cherry tree grows, at least we got this new one going in, and if the cherry tree comes back, at least it's not in a position where it doesn't matter too much if we lose the trial site. I think what's happened is the cherry tree's got its roots into the structural soils because they were right next to each other, and it's got hold of a whole load of water, and that looks healthy as hell. And in fact, it could do with pruning right back if Ben ever picks this up, because the canopies are now interfering with each other for the sake of the trial. Up against the corner of the house, you can see the unwatered tree, very spindly. It is the least, and it looks like it's grown no more than 2 years worth of growth, even though we're 4 years in. So that shows you, and I don't visit the site very often because I work in the opposite direction now in Surrey. So when I see it, I don't see it I'm going there every week and I go, bang, oh my word. And I was absolutely stunned. So the reason we did this part originally is they were looking at low traffic neighbourhoods. The councillors wanted to put in a whole pile of things like pocket parks, like, really kind of low grade. I'm going to call them low grade suds. That's from memory. I think that's in actually Oxford, Sue. I think that's up next to the Ashmolean from memory. But we didn't kind of want this. We wanted the kind of Mansfield type project, or that didn't have trees in, but we wanted the Mansfield scale project with trees into the rain gardens, and that was our even back then, back in 2020. Now, this is it's a poor picture, I'm afraid, but this is a road in Brighton. It's actually very steep. It's that picture looks like it's flat, but it comes down from the racecourse right way down to the seafront. And the Victorians planted all those elms in the gutter with the echelon parking, although they were 90 degrees in, but in essence, they didn't really have cars at that point in time. When the roads were macadam and permeable, and these are probably the happiest elms that we've got in the streets, coming down with the largest water flow heading straight down that road. They're still cobble gutters, but they intercept a huge amount of water. So we haven't invented this. Somebody knew what they were doing yonks ago, and have already done it and proved it. So to look around and use your eyes. But I thought that was there. I've nabbed this from BS 8640. I don't know how I'm doing for time. We've just been pretty close. And it shows you the kind of tree sizes that are recommended. And we have gone for large species elms somewhere between the middle of medium and small, working on the basis that the roots will percolate out into the soil outside and end up not very far away. What we have done differently is we have put the air wells right the way down into the base of the soil, and we've also used off-cut culvert pipe, which we've stuck the disc cutter into to get some airflow at different levels through, just lots of that lying around. What we haven't done, because we're on chalk, is to put in a base free draining layer, because we kind of want water to wick up from the chalk in the summer, and any even fines into the Stockholm mix kind of stone when it comes in will stop that capillary action. We have moved where we're not putting roadways over the top into using kind of demolition waste, so 20 to 40 crushed concrete and brick. No fines is the important bit, and mixing that up with a 30% biochar. 25% works, 30% is better, and that is biochar is a compost biochar mix, and the compost is around about a third of that mix as well, and that can be supplied pre-mix, which is actually quite handy. So once you've kind of got the hang of the structural soils, the thought process then is, well, what else can you do with them? And actually, when you think about bioswales and how they work, if you fill those up with structural soils, you're killing two birds or several birds with one stone. You remove the silt, you increase the water capacity because the water carries up the whole volume, and also you can then plant hedges for BNG if you're linking your Stockholm tree pits up with your bioswales. So with that thought, the next job we're doing, we have a school here. All of this playing field needs decompacting, and you can see this whole lot floods the living daylights out of the estate below it. So we're disconnecting a very poor filter drain that should never have been built in the first place. We're putting in a bioswale, and we're building some outdoor classrooms next using some structural tree pits, 4 trees, same species, 2 large, 2 small, so the back one's got a chance of growing, and we're then saving more money by muck away as a large part of the expense. We're going to make the seating under the trees for a bit of climate adaptation project. That's where we're going next. So here's our conclusion to finish, and a couple of thank yous. So take a Kaizen approach to this. Get it in, get it stuck in, learn what you're doing, work out what fails. Don't be scared to fail. If you're scared to fail, you won't do it. We started off, these were 14,000 a tree pit. Whilst they were going in, someone had done one somewhere else. I'm not going to say where, but they were 110. What I've learned is keeping the contractor as fast as possible with good planning is where you save the money. What we learned from the site is that the crates and the structural soils were within a few £100 of each other, and I thought there'd be a massive difference, and there wasn't, because it took a lot longer whilst we were fiddling around with the structural soils. As you get better at it, you learn how to do that faster, but until you get in there and muck about with it, you're not going to learn. It's like Mike was saying, get in there and look at your trees, get stuck into it. The second important thing was to ensure everyone knows what you're doing, so good signage to inform the public, and we got great buy-in. Everybody wanted to know what they were doing to actually solve the rest of the problems in the area, so good signage was quite important. Utilising a wide range of variables, and get all council staff buy-in right the way up and down across the teams to make that happen. It wasn't just a parks thing, it wasn't just an ARB thing, it wasn't just a highways thing, it was everybody, and that was really quite important. And if you can produce your own biochar, because that's the next biggest cost, from your municipal green waste, that generates your heat and power and your carbon credits, and effectively in a single decision will make any council net zero whenever they get round to it. So have a look at what Shropshire are doing, because they are without a doubt leading the way. And I think I've already said contracts are the expensive bit, get them done out as fast as possible. So that's the polite thank yous. I'll leave that up there for you to read, but they're the people that made all of this possible, and helped and got stuck in, and really have, even at post it, been out, looked at it and followed up. We are going to potentially do some route penetrating radar to see where they're going, and we're also going to look at the different moisture content summer and winter at the different heights, because I think showing how the capillary action works is some information we could do with. But that is me, and I hope I haven't overdone it.
Thank you, Mark. I know we're running a little bit behind, so I appreciate you moving on. Again, I'll roll right into the next speaker's time. But I wanted to thank you very much for that highly technical project presentations. It was quite a challenge and very interesting to see the detail behind it. Our next speaker is Paul Nolan, Director of the Mersey Forest, who will talk about the vital topic of getting the right budget for planting and establishment aftercare. So with that, Paul, welcome.
Thank you. People able to see the slides?
Not yet.
Okay. Yep, brilliant. Okay, I know we're short of time, so I may scoot through some of these, and I'm sure
that's okay. Well, we do have time. We would cut down on our question time, so you can take your 15 minutes. We do have time for that.
Okay. Great, thank you. So I'm sure everyone can have an opinion on the right budget. So these are my thoughts, personal thoughts, really. I've got some colleagues who are listening as well, so they may want to chip in at the end as well. So just a bit about the Mersey Forest. So we're one of England's community forests based up in the northwest. We cover Cheshire and Liverpool City region. We've been around since 1991. Our journey to date has been mostly about learning how to create and deliver this thing called a community forest in the Mersey Forest. So lots of trials and errors and getting to understand how you create a community forest when you don't actually own any land and you have no dedicated funding to actually create it. So whilst we wouldn't say we know how to do this now, we've got lots of experience. So from 25 onwards, we're kind of thinking we're into the next phase of the Mersey Forest, which is how do you grow and nurture a community forest and engage communities in establishing a wood culture, so that by 2050 onwards, we've got trees and woodlands at the heart of our communities, and people understanding the role that trees play in their life. And I know there's been presentations earlier on about the benefits of trees and woodlands. In terms of what we've done, so over the past 30 odd years, we've planted over 4,000 hectares of new woodland. Just in the last 5 years alone, planted over 6,500 urban trees, brought in about £23 million worth of external funds, and those funds can be used to plant the trees and pay for up to 15 years worth of establishments. I think part of the focus of this slot is, how do we both pay for the planting, but how do we make sure the trees thrive throughout those early years so that they can grow to provide the benefits that we want them to provide. And that's obviously a constant challenge. How do we get resources in to enable us to do things in the right way, to the right sort of quality, as we heard in the previous session? The sorts of thinking and technical delivery of trees isn't cheap, but it's important to get it right. These are the sorts of things that we can fund in the Mersey Forest. So it's everything from a single tree through hedgerows to small scale and then very large scale woodland as well. So everything from a single tree up to several hundred hectares of new woodland. And then the question about, what's the right budget? And when Sue gave me this as a topic, there was really the thought was, well, who's assessing what the right budget is? Because obviously we've got a variety of stakeholders. So the budget for the funder is different from the budget for the landowner. So we've got this balance that we need to find between who is paying, what do we want to achieve, how do we achieve it, how do we design it, how have we got the right contractors, the right rates to actually implement the schemes, and then how do we make sure that the nurseries are rewarded for growing the sorts of trees that we want to put into our hard landscapes, into our towns and cities, to provide the sorts of benefits that we want them to achieve in the long term, so they're not just put in and disappear after a few years. So we want to be very specific about the right budget for the types of trees we want, the size of trees we want, and for the outcomes. And then this is the table on the top right is not 100% accurate. I wanted to just look at what we've been funding over the past 5 or 6 years in terms of, on the left-hand column, the price per tree, including establishment, ranging everywhere from £100 per tree to 50,000, and the percentage of those price that we've planted in the past 6 years. So as you can see, we've done some very similar to the trees that we just shown in the last presentation. So, £15,000 to £20,000 a go in the hard landscape, but our percentage of tree planting at that level is very low, below 5%, probably 3%. They are hard landscape, city centre. Most of our planting comes in at around about the 700 to 900 pounds per tree figure, and they're mainly verge and green sites. Not many of those are going to be in hard standing, which again may be an issue in terms of where we want to get those trees. And then the graphic at the bottom is we just thought about, what is the right budget. So if we go to the bottom of that graphic, if the budget is too low, we get a poor scheme, the trees basically die, and that's bad for our reputation. We don't get a chance to go into that site again. The amber above that, the budget not quite good enough, so the trees survive, they definitely don't thrive. We drive around and we see trees that just haven't had enough care and attention after they've been put in the ground, or they're the wrong tree, the wrong size, in the wrong place. They don't provide the benefits needed, and again, they're not helping us to win the argument that we need more trees in our towns and cities. The green section is that, the good scheme. The trees thrive, it's the right budget, we achieve all the benefits that we need, and provide the evidence that we need to do more as well. So people are convinced about what we're doing, can see the benefits, people recognise the benefits and want to see more of those trees being planted. If we go above the green, we get into a great scheme, and they're the exemplars, I would say. but they are special. They're one-offs, or certainly they can't be replicated very frequently because you just can't get the budget to do them. They're not replicable generally, but how can we learn the lessons from these to inform other schemes? And ideally, we want the green to move as far up into that great scheme bar as we possibly can. So how can we gradually increase the quality and perhaps gradually increase the budget that we get to plant these more special trees more frequently? And then the final one, because it's the budget may be too high. It's a fantastic scheme, but just unrepeatable. So we'll never, we do get those opportunities very now and again, but it doesn't mean we can repeat them very often. Again, that's my views on the sorts of budgets that might be right. And then we have to look at who can pay for the benefits that these urban trees provide. So at the minute, community forests, in reality, we're trying to fund adaptation activity. So the urban cooling, slowing the flow of water in towns and cities, from budgets that are actually earmarked for net zero, so for mitigation targets. We also do have planning providing significant funds, certainly in the Mersey Forest, for urban tree planting. But even when we combine these two funds, and they're not insignificant funds, we are able to fund those trees at around the £750 to £1,000 per tree, but we just don't have the funding to do very many of those 5, 10, 20,000 trees. And they're the ones that are those exemplars. And I guess what we're looking to do is how do we find the opportunities to get people to pay for, organisations and entities to pay for those benefits for those more expensive trees because of the range of benefits that they provide. And part of that is making the case, having good schemes that we can share with funders, with planners, with designers, etc. And TDAG do lots of that case making for us, so thank you. I think the evidence is very robust for urban trees and what they do for our towns and cities, and it's becoming increasingly evident that the tree planting that's gone in over the past 15, 20 years, is playing a vital role in keeping our towns and cities resilient. But the market for these benefits just isn't present at the moment. So that's our Mersey Forest next challenge, is how do we get the right budget to invest in the green infrastructure for those adaptation and health benefits that we need in our towns and cities. Thank you.
Well done.
I told you I'll be
great timing. Okay, so you've helped us make up a tiny little bit of time. Thank you very much for that. At this time, I would like to invite all of the speakers to turn on their cameras and invite the audience to turn on their cameras. Raise your hands if you'd like to ask a question directly. I will manage expectations on questions and answer. We have very little time left today, so we might get 1 or 2 questions in, and I'd like to focus on the speakers who have not yet answered questions, which would be a fair way to do it. So if you have a question for one of the last 3 speakers, otherwise please do not raise your hand. But Naomi, let's start with you then. And unmute yourself.
Thank you, Marybeth.
There you go.
First of all, thanks everybody for very interesting presentations. I have a question for Lee. What I didn't see in your list was site preparation and addressing the primary challenge that trees, especially street trees, face is that accessible soil volume and how that can be improved through site preparation that precedes tree planting. And I would add a comment about the use of the word infrastructure when it comes to trees. And I would say trees are not infrastructure, which is defined as a human construct. They are living organisms, and we never want to reduce them to them being considered street furniture. One has to think of them that they must be sustained. And
I couldn't agree more, Naomi.
Sustaining them first and foremost is what enables them to sustain us.
Yes.
So
I totally agree. I don't want them to be thought of as furniture. Neither do I always want them to be to natural capital accounting. I think neither do I want them to be converted into this is how much it benefits us. That's, to my mind, that's talking the language of people who can only understand money. And actually those people who can only understand money need to start becoming a bit bilingual. But back to your question.
Yeah.
I think, but I like using infrastructure because it happens early in a site's development, early doors, all that infrastructure is being planned. And I think nature should also be planned at the sort of outline planning application stage. It's more relevant for Homes England than perhaps some other sites, but very large development sites, I don't want it to be left out. And then apologies on the street issue and swales and so on. I should have said a major caveat of the Homes England forthcoming Homes England tree standard, fingers crossed, is it's not dealing with street trees at all, because TDAG have been doing a great deal of work on precisely that topic, which is very shortly going to be published. So there was absolutely no point trying to, I've been a little bit involved in that as well amongst a lot of other people. So hence I'm going to have in the document itself, there will be a link to the street trees that TDAG have been working on. I think whether it's going to be a manual for streets or a separate publication from Active Travel England, Sue, I'm sure you can enlighten us on that.
Thank you, Lee.
Well, yeah, I noticed
we don't know. We don't know about where it's going to go yet. We'll let you
know. Sorry. Paul, I noticed there's a question in the chat box about if there's affordable trees in the verges, does it limit what you can offer in inner city areas that might need trees in terms of sort of looking at equity? Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, so we also do try to target the tree planting in areas of where trees are needed, so street tree poor areas. But the simple answer is probably yes. Are we able to put trees in all the places we want to? Absolutely not, because we can't afford it. So we'll do what we can with the resources we have, and put those trees as best we can into the places which we think need them, or the community say that they need them, and we're able to work in those places.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any questions they'd like to ask?
I'd like to ask a question of Paul, actually. Okay. I don't know whether I'm allowed to do that. I mean, I thought it was really fascinating presentation, because that's something that, in Sheffield and the Street Tree Partnership that we're looking at quite closely, and kind of the cost of, from planting in, a park to planting in hard standing in the city centre, the cost just is logarithmic, really. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that has happened is many trees have just gone into pits. So the tarmac is cut and the trees go directly into a pit. And what I wonder is whether there's a kind of halfway house, whether trees become they're okay for 30 years and then off they go for the next tree. And that feels wrong. It feels totally wrong, but it is. Until we get that commitment that we're talking about going to Sweden and looking at Malmo and what they do there, it's amazing, but they've got millions of pounds to spend on trees, whereas we don't have that. So I mean, I don't know whether you've come across that in your own work, and whether how it fits with the Mersey Forest.
I don't think we've ever got to the point where we said trees only for 30 years, but kind of, maybe in the back of our head, maybe we thought in some places that might be the case. But if we were to be thinking that, it goes to the point almost of what Naomi was saying, treating it as infrastructure. They're here for a little while and then we'll replace them. And I'm not sure many of us would want that, even if we do kind of agree with the whole green infrastructure discussion. It's hard one. I think it's what we're trying to do is to continually show the value of planting trees in urban spaces, trying to gradually get more resource to move up that logarithmic scale, and every now and again getting the resources to put in some trees at £20,000 a go, and they look amazing. and people say these are great, but the budgets aren't there to continue doing them. So we have to every now and again just make hay while the sun shines. When those resources become available, make sure we do a really good job and promote them as best we can.
Thank you. I'm gonna David, you have one last question. Keep it brief.
Well, the very last question. That's what an
okay.
honor.
Last question, very brief.
Yeah. So thanks first to all of the inspiring speakers. There was a something in the chat about equitable distribution of trees, and then you're starting to talk about health aspects and the ecosystem deliveries toward human health. So there's been a lot of interesting research lately about the human microbiome and exchanges between that and soils and vegetation, etc. So my question I think mostly for Lee and Paul, that is, when selecting species, is anybody consciously looking at the contributions to the local exposome or the microbiome that's found outside of humans that then is taken up by humans and is improving the health in the inhabitants that are living where trees are? Is that understandable?
Yes, understandable. Shall I start, Paul?
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of an association between different tree species and microbiomes of skin and gut and so on and so forth. Is there something I need to read? ? To you, David. I'd be very interested if there is a particular link to particular species. But otherwise, it's more, in general, it's more a question of our designers, our landscape architects, urban designers need to understand that. Parents need to understand this. People need to understand this, that getting out in nature, I think particularly after rain, isn't it? In woodland, it's particularly good for you, various things you breathe in. And allowing that to happen, that actual contact to happen. So it's another reason why all this green infrastructure, including trees and other stuff as well, should be quite close, very close to where people live and where they're playing, where they're going. They're passing it, they're seeing it, they're touching it. It is a super interesting area, isn't it, of research. And also I have read about different benefits from woodland areas and green spaces, that the more you know about, the more ecologically aware you are, or the more knowledge you have, there has been research on, do more highly biodiverse areas, does a higher level of biodiversity do you more benefit? And that was done, I think, started about 10 years ago. So it's a fairly new stream of research, but that's super interesting. And the answer is yes, it does.
Interesting.
But I mean, I'm paraphrasing massively. I'm sorry, there's sort of much more nuance to that.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you to all of our speakers, Catherine, Mike, Lee, Bark, and Paul. Very much appreciated. Thanks to the organizers and the participants. There's quite a lot of information, a lot to unpack here, and it's really clear that priorities are changing, research data is emerging, and we have to move faster to learn more quickly and keep our dedicated tree professionals engaged and working hard, because trees are more important than ever. So I'll turn it over to Sue now, and she's going to give just a brief update on some of the events that are upcoming.
Okay. Well, first, of course, a thank you to Marybeth for stepping in and chairing so competently. And obviously to everybody who's taken part and everybody who's attended. I noticed there were a lot of technical questions in the chat, quite a few aimed at Mark, which I can't possibly find an answer to. So Mark, I'm going to either put you in touch with those people like Martin Gammy to sort of bottom them out, or we'll try and do something between us. Our next seminar will be on the 15th of July, same time, 2 to 4 p.m. BST, and it's part 2. So in part 2, we're going to particularly look at monitoring and evaluation, for establishment and growth. So some of the questions and issues raised today, I think, will be further examined and explored then. Otherwise, any other particular news from Trees and Design Action Group will be on in our June newsletter, which is on the website now. I did manage to do a very rapid reply to the biodiversity consultation about removing BNG from small sites and sites up to 49 houses. It's due tomorrow, so probably nobody's got much time to do something, but it's actually quite an important issue. So I'll leave that thought with you, and meanwhile say that it's 4 o'clock and time for tea.